start talking about Christopher Rufo, like, you know, the guys that
that's something I did want to talk about, actually.
Injected in at the last moment to run this.
And that's exactly why we need to get rid of these people. Now, I don't know who Christopher Rufo is.
He comes from the Manhattan Institute.
Okay, that makes perfect focus. He's not. He doesn't look. He's not Jewish, but Manhattan Institute is Jewish. He's Italian. That's an Italian name. Christopher Rufo is very Italian. He's not going to find a Jew named that.
No.
But he's probably like a New Jersey Italian guy. It sounds very much like somebody I would have grown up with. Hey, Christopher Rufo, right? But he's not a guy like that. He's like a fag. He's like a weak.
Yeah, like loser. Ryan Kuderski's the same thing. He's from Queens.
Yeah, and so.
But he's a fruitcake.
Oh, yeah,
so even though he's
it's not like you don't
manly,
find these kind of guys coming out of those areas. You'll sometimes get these.
Well, I mean, I don't know. He's from Middle Village. Middle Village is like all like Irish and Italian like working class people.
Yeah, well, let me see if you could talk for a minute, if I can find that video, because it was on Marc Lamont Hill. It was on his Twitter. Okay, so I think I got it right here. Where he asked this guy to talk about why he likes being white, and it's like one. Okay, I've got it right here. So, of course, Twitter is being annoying. So let me bring this up. So here we have Marc Lamont Hill talking to this. This guy looks like a nerd. I mean, just look at this nerd. This guy just looks like a nerd.
Well, he's manly for a conservative, for a professional conservative.
Sort of, but anyway, this is very pathetic. So.
And if I were to say to you right now, Christopher, what do you like about being white? What would you say?
I don't know. Again, it's such an amorphous term. It's like a census term or a
but can you do me a favor? Indulge me. Indulge me for one. We're running out of time. Indulge me for a minute. I understand you see it as all these things, but you surely recognize that the world sees you as white. You know the world reads you as white. And if you were to ask me some things I like about being black, I could talk about cultural norms. I could talk about tradition. I could talk about the kind of commonalities I feel around the diaspora. If I were to ask you particularly if you're saying whiteness is a thing that is being constructed as negative and shouldn't be, name something positive that you like about being white.
Well, sure. I'll answer with a thing. There's a lot of documents that are floating around public schools that say things like timeliness, showing up on time, is a white supremacist value or a white value, white dominant value. Things like rationality, things like the Enlightenment, things like objectivity, and these are very strange things to be ascribed to a racial identity. My view is that these are actually should be ascribed to every individual human being. Every individual human being, regardless of whatever racial category we impose on them.
But Christopher, that doesn't answer the question.
He's right. It doesn't.
You're telling me you're making straw men about things that are ascribed to whiteness that you think are wrongfully ascribed to whiteness. I'm saying if whiteness isn't a negative thing, and there's something that that whiteness actually shouldn't be constructed as all negative, name something positive that you believe is positive about being white.
Again, I don't buy into the framework that the world can be reduced into these metaphysical categories of whiteness and blackness.
It's not a metaphysical category.
That's wrong. I think we should look at people as individuals. I think we should celebrate different people's accomplishments. And again, I think the idea you mentioned Ignatieff. Ignatieff says the goal is to, quote, abolish the white race. In any other context, this would be.
Wait, how is that different than your fucking goal, Rufo?
Right.
It's no different. Now that clip is almost over, but we got the picture.
Well, he's controlled opposition.
But here's the thing, he knows. Marc Lamont Hill also is he knows. I would have a few choice words for Mr. Hill here, but now Rufo knows that he cannot sit there on TV. What is this? What is this on? Some recode? Okay. Yeah, this looks like it's on Vox or some shit like that. I don't know what it is on. But he knows that if he goes out and he starts ascribing positive traits to whites that by implication cannot also be ascribed to any other race, now he's a white supremacist. Of course, Marc Lamont Hill can talk about cultural norms, which of course black cultural norms, I mean, really. He can talk about cultural norms, values, commonalities he feels around other black people. White people have all that too. White people have all of that too, and Rufo can't say it.
Well, you could make the argument, let's talk about European civilization, right? That would be the argument.
You can answer the question. That's not
easily. There are a million ways to answer that question.
That's not the problem. But the issue is he rejects the framework, but he rejects it in the wrong way. like, I would say, well, here's the thing, Mr. Lamont Hill. Will you, if I tell you, will you ever accept it? Or will you just attack what I say?
Right.
And in fact, you know, what I would say is, you know damn well that if I start doing that, if I start saying, here are positive things about being white, which by implication cannot be ascribed, or at least ascribed generally speaking, to other races, well, then what you're going to do, or if I even say, like, what white people do or have isn't necessarily better, it's just what I like better because I'm also white, all of that will get me branded a racist and get me canceled, and you know that.
Right.
So this is a bullshit thing to begin with. What I object to is the framework whereby I cannot answer that question without getting canceled. So you are trying to bait me into saying something cancelable because you know that I will be. So who really has the power and privilege, Mr. Hill? That's what I would do.
Those are the limits of conservatism in a nutshell right there, though. You know.
Right. But it's really funny how he says, like, okay, you talk about objectivity, you talk about timeliness, you talk about punctuality, all these like boring things that the most boring things you can think of, right? To talk about white people with, like being on time. Like, you're never on time. What are we talking about? Like, you particularly aren't. But like that's not. Who cares? Like, so what? Some people are on time, some people are not. It's like the nerdiest, most lame things he's talking about. But like.
Being a nerd is
being a nerd.
Well, that's another thing I don't like about the conservative concept of that is that
hold on a second,
being a nerd is being white. Why?
Well, first of all, yeah, well, that's because that's a Jewish thing right there. That's a Jewish construction. But he says, like, I don't agree that should be ascribed to white. Like, that's something that like anybody can have. And then in the and then he says, I think we shouldn't talk about these metaphysical concepts and talk about race like it has these connected. Everybody should be individual or whatever. And he says, and let's talk about Noel Ignatieff, who says abolish the white race. I'm like, but that's basically what you're saying. What you're saying, Christopher Rufo, is like a slight tweaking of what Noel Ignatieff says.
Right.
Like,
that's why
when Noel Ignatieff says it, it's like he is clearly racially hostile. That's where he kind of blew his cover. He's clearly racially hostile. He hates white people, right? Mm-hmm. What you're saying, Christopher Rufo, is like, I just think, I mean, in fact, your way is almost worse because some white people could buy it.
Right.
Because they think it's smart or something like that. Noel Ignatieff obviously wants to, like, kill you, right? Like,
conservatives are plausible because they tell you half truths.
Rufo is a little bit more plausible with it, where he's like, oh, well, these things are anybody can work to these values. It's not just whites. It's not just about whites or whatever. So it's like, you want to abolish the white race as well, Christopher, because you won't talk about it. Now, again, it's very easy to talk about things I like about being white, but I could also say without even, the other thing is, I can answer the question without crossing boundaries that Marc Lamont Hill would consider cancelable. Be like, look, you talked about you share racial commonalities that make you more comfortable around black people. Well, I'm like that too with white people. Is that wrong? I feel that way too with whites. Is that wrong? Am I not allowed to feel that way about my own race?
But he does feel that way, and that's kind of what Marc Lamont Hill. I don't know if he understands all the mechanisms. Maybe he does.
He understands that guy can't answer that question.
Well,
for sure.
But on some deeper level, he also knows that this is what he believes. And I think some of the frustration these blacks have when they talk to white conservatives is they're like, why don't you just say what you mean? Like, why do you use all these code words and metaphors? Just say.
Like I said, I'm more mad at Rufo than Hill.
Right.
Because what Rufo said, everything Hill said was right in the thing. What sucked is that the guy that he's talking to, and it makes you seem like a fucking shitty hypocrite. Rufo looks like a cowardly, weak hypocrite because he cannot talk plainly about race. Marc Lamont Hill is allowed to. Marc Lamont Hill is privileged to talk plainly about race. Now, what he cannot talk plainly about is Israel, because he did that, and he got fired from CNN. So that's another thing I would say, but hey, Mark, you can add, would you ever get to interrogate a Jew the way you get to interrogate me?
Right.
And who's letting you do this? Who is putting you in the chair and not putting you? Who gets to take you in and out of that chair? That chair you're in, you could be in it or you could be out of it. And on whose whim? Not white people's, because who fired you before? And why? It was because Marc Lamont Hill said from the river to the sea, and Jews were like, oh my God, he's genocide. So they fired him.
Yeah.
I don't think he didn't lose his job.
Try deconstructing Jewish identity like Noel Ignativ does to European identity.
You could do it.
If you do that, yeah, you can do it, but then you get fired like Nick Cannon.
Yeah, or you'll just be destroyed.
You go and say, "Oh, we the real Jews."
It was
the
really
Jews
funny
right now, they ain't real.
Alex sent me that video over the weekend, and my first response was like, "Hey, so ask Marc Lamont Hill, who it is that can fire and not fire him." And Alex was like, "Oh shit, I didn't even know that he got canceled for being pro-Palestine." And I was like, "Yeah, that makes it even more
Touré?
rich."
What was that guy? He was
Touré,
like Prince, went by one name, Touré.
Touré, yeah.
That guy
I actually
got
met
fired
that dude on the street one time in New York City. It was
really.
Well, I'd see him because they were putting him on CNN as some like cultural correspondent, and I was just like, it was down in, of course, in like Soho, right? Because I used to work down there, and he was on the street. I was like, "Hey, Touré," and he was like, "Yeah, what's up, man?"
Yeah, that's the thing about living in New York. You meet these people.
Well, I mean, I don't really give a shit about Touré. He's just sort of funny.
Oh, you don't? Well, he was an up and coming guy until he got fired. Remember, he got fired for.
Did he get canceled for Israel stuff?
Yeah, a lot of these blacks.
Because he looks to me like one of these blacks, like Eric Andre, that might actually be half Jewish himself, or like Malcolm Gladwell.
No, he's not.
I mean? Like Eric Andre and Malcolm Gladwell are both half Jewish. In case
I'll say this: like a lot of these, like kind of institutionally backed POC, they go a little far on Israel. And it's because they haven't gotten the memo. They see low-status people defending Israel, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Donald Trump, and they're like, okay, this is my green light to attack them. This is what I'm supposed to do. And then they're like really confused when they get fired.
They also haven't
their
gotten
contracts
the memo.
don't get renewed, like Crystal Ball and Sagar.
They also don't get the memo that, like, one, on some level, they don't get the memo that, like, well, with blacks, they get the memo that they can say whatever the fuck they want.
Right.
And they're allowed to, and that they can like actually racially attack whites, like in a really targeted way, right? Like literally here, like Marc Lamont Hill is basically saying the implication is there's nothing good about being white, but it could be that he actually is like, it's fucking insane that you're here talking about this critical race here. You can't even tell me what's good about being white. Now, The thing is, it's like. Now, I wonder if Marc Lamont Hill, I can't read his mind, and you never know with blacks what they're thinking or not. With Jews, you can always kind of know. Does he know that there are white people that will be more than happy to give him a laundry list of things that are great about white people?
He knows.
Yeah.
He knows.
Yeah.
He knows, and he has the same disgust for conservatives that we do.
He would have more respect for you or me.
Oh, of course he would. And I know this because I've spoken to
plainly.
blacks very candidly without insulting them. I mean, if you insult blacks, they're going to get
calling
mad.
them stupid nigger, they're going to get mad.
Right.
Get mad about
but
that.
if you're just like, yeah, man, like, the bluebirds and the blackbirds or whatever, all that.
Like Muhammad Ali. Well,
yeah.
They don't, because they don't understand blacks, again, certain issues with them, but they don't get how the fuck white people are so gay. Like, they don't understand it. They're like, yo, why are white people so fucking soft? Like, they don't understand all the tripwires and mechanisms that we're facing that they're not. And that's why they think that when the TV tells them that they're being oppressed by us, so they'll believe that. And then they see that white people generally have more money and are doing better, but they don't understand also white people have like extremely high levels of stress that they don't have. I think it was Chris Rock did this thing. What was it about? Like, when a white person doesn't have any money, they're like freaking out. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? When a black person doesn't have any money, they just like sit on the couch and like don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Because it's just like whatever. It's very true. Like, black people don't really they don't stress things like white people do, so they don't understand.
Well, they have their own stresses and stuff, but they're very different than.
But it's a different thing. They don't get the kind of stress that a white person gets when they are asked to say something good about white people. Can you do it? And they're like, oh my god, like how can I juggle this problem here? You know what I mean?
Well, what makes them hate white people even more is they think that we're just being weaselly when you're evasive. They think you're just being a weasel.
In a way,
he is.
Like Christopher Rufo is being a weasel.
Yeah.
And my thing is like, see, it would be easy. In a way, Marc Lamont Hill is smarter than most black people, a lot smarter, and so. He probably understands the kind of shit test he has set up. And it is. And the problem is that we can't be satisfied with the answer, well, Christopher Rufo just can't answer that. Well, then he can't be a white advocate. Because he's not. He's not being a white advocate.
And that's why he's in that position.
He's not a white advocate. He's not racially advocating for you. He's advocating against racism. He's an anti-racist activist. He is saying everything should be deracialized. Now, they will say, well, you want it deracialized now because it's racialized against whites. That's what blacks will say, right? They're like, now you want to do that because we've got the upper hand. When you had the upper hand, that's what they will think he's saying. But he would be, I would never take the upper hand. You know what I mean? But again, it's like, it's disgusting. This pissed me off so much when I saw it. And I was like, this is why this guy, who I never heard of before in my life, before 2 weeks ago when I had seen him, this is also why I think, and we said this was going to happen, and I saw it start happening. Jews are going to start taking up the anti-critical race theory position.
It's already happened.
It's already happened, and it's a low-hanging fruit.
They kind of always do this, like in the 90s.